I recently started researching how to write better stories, and I wanted to look at other great manga. I grabbed one of my favorites off the shelf, Hunter x Hunter. Obviously, Hunter x Hunter is one of the most popular shonen series of all time, and it's Togashi's second really successful series. So it's not something that you could have just done by accident. In this video, I want to analyze how this manga is so effective in the early chapters and try to figure out what secrets Togashi knows that make it so addicting to read. I'm studying to become a manga artist by learning how to draw and how to write. So if this journey is something that you're interested in, subscribe to my channel. I have a bunch more story analysis videos that I want to make to learn as much as possible, so watch out for those. But anyway, let's get into the video. Okay, so let's start at the start. Chapter 1 of a manga always has to get readers interested in sticking around for the rest of the series. When there's thousands of manga out there to read, the start of the story has to convince a reader why they should read this instead of something else. When I looked at this first chapter, I noticed that it's basically covering the whole first act of a conventional 3-act structure. If you don't know about the 3-act structure, it's basically a framework used to give a story structure. When I was researching, I found this video from the YouTube channel Studio Binder that I'll link in the description, but they give a pretty good explanation about all the different parts of a 3-act structure. The first chapter of Hunter x Hunter hits all the points of the first act. The points are hook, an inciting event, and the first plot point. So let's look at where each one is in the chapter. So the purpose of the hook is to make the audience ask a question. And to be honest, this is something that I noticed Togashi does in a special way, so I want to come back to it in a little bit. The next thing is the inciting incident. It's something that introduces the character to what's going to be their main goal or journey. We see it in a flashback where Gon meets Kite for the first time. This is the point where Gon first finds out about hunters and his dad, which takes him from his normal life to now having his mind set on a goal of becoming a hunter and meeting his dad. There's an idea in storytelling called the hero's journey, which a lot of stories and especially a lot of shonen manga kind of follow. In the hero's journey, the hero, the main character, goes from a normal or ordinary world to an unknown world. And this meeting with Kite is Gon's first time getting a glimpse at the unknown world. And it leads us to the next part of the 3-act structure, which is the first plot point. The first plot point is basically the main character's movement towards that goal. It's kind of a point of no return where the character, they start their journey. And it's probably pretty obvious, but this is when Gon leaves the island for the first time, and now he's on the ship headed to the hunter exam. So by covering that first act in the first chapter, Togashi is basically just introducing us to the main character and then starting off the journey. But the thing that I missed that Togashi does the best in my opinion is the first part of Act 1 in the 3-act structure, and it's the hook. As I mentioned earlier, the hook is supposed to make the reader ask a question, and since they want to answer their question, they're going to keep reading. It's going to make them want to turn to the next page, and in terms of a weekly manga, it's going to make them want to buy the next issue. So let's go back to the start of the chapter real quick. The first page gives us a peek into the world of Hunter x Hunter. I've seen this kind of opening page used a lot in shonen manga specifically, and it seems to be done to grab the reader's attention instantly and to give them a reason to continue reading. But I've often seen it done in a way that I really dislike. The first few pages are sometimes just exposition about the story's world, which is just super descriptive, which can just be really boring, because I don't really have any reason to care about the information that I'm reading. Togashi does it really well here though, because he doesn't tell us anything at all. He shows weird creatures, artifacts and environments, but with no explanation of what they actually are. The only thing it introduces is this really vague term of hunters, and he doesn't describe it at all. A different author might have started with exposition about what a hunter is, but Togashi just keeps it mysterious and vague, and it definitely makes you want to turn to the next page. For the next few pages, Togashi continues the lack of exposition thing and lets us just infer what's going on in the scene. We're introduced to a bunch of things with no context. An island shaped like a whale, a forest, a tree, and then a boy fishing in the tree. And then he catches something, and it's this giant fish with insect-like legs. And literally none of it is explained, it's just shown to you. It's another great example of almost forcing us to keep reading by just giving us a bunch of questions. And obviously, the main question is, who is this kid? Again, a different writer might have just introduced the character with a text box next to him, but Togashi makes it way more interesting by showing you something and then making you wait for the answer to any questions that you might have. And you'll see throughout the video, that's the main thing we're gonna see. Writing in this way makes it feel like an actual narrative, because when things are just written in an info dump way, oh, this is this character, he lives here, he wants to do this, he has this ability. It just feels like reading the summary of a story rather than experiencing the actual story itself. Now that you have those questions, you're excited to find out the answers. That's an idea that's often called show don't tell, and I feel like it's just super key to making readers ask questions and build up curiosity. This guy says,
5 adults working together couldn't reel that monster in, so what chance does a little kid have, huh?
And then from that line, now you're even more curious about who the kid is, because why is he stronger than 5 men combined? Gon says, time to keep your end of the deal, Aunt Mito. Even though it's answered on the next page, it's still an example of the reader being forced to ask a question of what deal do they have, like what's their deal. Also, I have to point out, this is the first real dialogue in the chapter, and it's 9 pages in. Well, if you count this drawing of Gon as a page. It just goes to show that you can allow the reader to just infer things. Having a character who like self-narrates everything they're doing can be super annoying, I think. And sometimes having no dialogue can be way more effective, especially for the creating questions thing. When Aunt Mito has a negative response to Gon wanting to become a hunter, she doesn't instantly say why she's unhappy about it. And now you're wondering about that too. And obviously when we realize it's to do with Gon's dad, we just become curious about him. Even if the mystery is answered on just the next page, I think it's still worth it setting up that question. Because even if it's just 1 page, you just made the reader turn to 1 more page. And also, when we get an answer to one of our questions, it normally just leads to more questions. For example, in the flashback where Gon meets Kite, we get an answer to what a hunter is and who Gon's dad is. But to be honest, it's not really much of an answer at all. It's more of just a hint, or maybe we're moving slightly towards an answer. All we find out about Gon's dad is that his name is Jing, and then all we find out about hunters is that Jing is one of them. Oh, and Kite is one as well. Also, I find it pretty interesting that we find out that Gon wants to become a hunter before we have any kind of idea of what a hunter actually is. It's only in this read through that I realized how important building up that level of curiosity is. It's only the first chapter of the series, but it's absolutely clear what kind of story this is. And it's already all about the main reason why I love this manga, the mystery. I always loved Hunter x Hunter for how its world felt so vast and unexplored. And obviously, if everything is explained to you, that sense of wonder kind of dies. But Togashi has the reader curious from the first page, and he keeps it up through the whole series. This is super key to making the reader care about the work, because in the first few chapters, it's way too early to try and get anybody emotionally invested. Right now, the main goal is just to get them to the next page, because as far as the reader is concerned, this is just another manga out of thousands. Giving them all these mysteries is the hook that makes them keep reading, instead of putting it down and just reading something else that they already care about. Other writers will try to make emotional stakes right away. When we don't really know the characters yet, it's hard to actually care about the emotional state. Curiosity is what gets us to the part where we can start to actually care. At the start of the second act in the 3-act structure, there's something called the first pinch. This is basically an introduction to the main conflict that's going to come in the story. A lot of the things we see in the Hunter exam, even though they're definitely tough challenges for the characters, are framed in this introduction type of way. I guess that comes with it being an exam arc, but almost every challenge phase is giving us a glimpse of what's to come in the future. Again, Togashi's just building up curiosity constantly. This is really done in every single aspect of the story, so I don't want to go through each chapter and speak on every instance of it, because this video would end up super long with me just reiterating the same point, even though I guess I'm kind of doing that right now, but whatever. A good example of a first pinch is after Gon, Leorio and Kurapika get off the boat and they're headed to the pine tree that the captain told them to go to. They're stopped in the middle of the road and they're told to answer a question.
Your son and your daughter have both been abducted. You can only have one of them back. Whom do you choose? 1, your daughter, or 2, your son?
And for this test, the correct answer is to give no answer at all, since there's not really a correct answer to that. But even after they pass that test, Gon's still thinking about it and says, what if one day you really have to make a choice like that? And that's pretty blatantly giving us an introduction to the kinds of challenges that we need to expect the characters to face at some point. And that's the whole point of the first pinch. It's basically preparing us for the conflicts to come. Another good example of the first pinch idea is the introduction of If you've read or watched the rest of the series, you know that Hisoka becomes way more important later and is a main antagonist later on in the story. It's up to speculation whether Togashi knew he wanted Hisoka to be as important as he became when he wrote this introduction chapter. There's no way for me to know if he made it up as he went or if he had everything planned from the beginning. But my suspicion is though that in the context of a long running manga, a lot of manga artists probably don't write everything all at once. I'm sure a loose idea for the general direction of the story is there, but nothing detailed or concrete. I feel like Togashi might have just put a lot of mysteries that he could draw upon later. For example, the dilemma I mentioned before, what if one day you really have to make a choice like that? I'm not all the way caught up to the manga, but I don't think Guns had to make a choice like that yet. So that piece of foreshadowing is yet to come to fruition. Because of that, I kind of feel like Togashi and other authors for these long running series will introduce things with very little explanation, and that hooks the reader and has them curious, and then they can later come back and draw upon those mysteries that they already put in the story and then develop them further. But speaking of character introduction, something I really love that Togashi does when he introduces all of his characters is allowing us to learn about them gradually, instead of just learning everything all at once. In other stories, when a character is introduced, we might see them and then get told who they are, where they come from, and then any information that makes them relative to the story. But Togashi just lets us know as little info as possible. A really good example of this is with Killua. At first, we just learn Killua's name and that he's the same age as Gon. Even though it's mysterious, that alone isn't really interesting though. In real life, we meet people every day, and we might not even find out their name, but we aren't really curious about who they are. But if that person does something really interesting, now you'd be more intrigued to find out more about them. Togashi does this right here as well. When he introduces Killua, we find out that Killua's built up his resistance to all poison. So now as you read this, you're curious to why an 11-year-old kid has built up resistance to all poison. But as always, Togashi is going to make us wait for our answer. And following the techniques that we saw earlier, every time we learn more about Killua, it's extremely vague. First, we learned that he wanted to join the exam just because he heard it was really tough, which doesn't answer actually anything at all. I guess from that you can just understand that he's really strong and he's doing challenges just because they're difficult. So now that just creates more questions, like why is this kid so strong? What would make him want to do one of the most difficult known challenges in the world of this story for no reward?
Look, fog! Let's get to the front. Yeah, if we lose sight of the examiner, we're in trouble.
That's not what I'm worried about. We should stay away from Hisoka.
Why?
He's a bloodthirsty killer, and he's looking for his next victim. He'll use the fog to his advantage and go on a killing spree. You're probably wondering how I know all of that, right? It's his scent.
What do you mean?
Well, the truth is, I'm just like him.
Well, you don't seem the same to me.
That's because I've hidden my true nature, kind of like that mayonnaise back there. But don't worry, you'll find out soon enough.
Again, it doesn't really answer anything, but it makes you way more curious about the kid. Like, how is this 11-year-old similar to the crazy murderer character that's clearly being shown as an antagonist? And I think it's so expertly done. Togashi is basically leading the reader down a trail to the answers that they're looking for. And in searching for your answers, you end up so many chapters into the story, and now you're just fully invested in the story. And it isn't something Togashi does just at the start of the story either. It's for almost every single character introduction. In JoJo's Bizarre Adventure author Hirohiko Araki's book called Manga in Theory and Practice, he speaks on the same topic. He says that he likes to introduce a character in the first panel, but then in the second, show them doing something unusual. The example he gives is a character who's introduced wanting to make food. In panel 1, he says, I think I'll make pasta tonight. But then in the next panel, he says, I guess I'll go to the wheat field. So now the reader's thinking, why isn't he starting by just boiling the pasta? And now he's going to get the raw ingredients to make it by hand. And Araki is well aware that this is going to make the reader want to turn the page and find out what happens next. It's literally the textbook example of what we've been seeing for most of the video. I think that looking at Hunter x Hunter's opening, you can see the tried and tested conventional structure for storytelling, especially in shonen manga, and it's done in just the most expert and efficient way you could probably find anywhere. And obviously, you see Togashi almost forcing us to keep reading by playing with our curiosity. I'm starting to work on my own story, and I really want to use these techniques as well. It would be sick to be able to have a reader not able to put the work down, the same way so many people have been hooked to work like Hunter x Hunter. So as I'm doing my own stuff, I'm going to keep analyzing other stories to see what I can learn and how I can improve my own writing skills. If you're interested in seeing those kinds of videos, like this video and subscribe to the channel. I hope you guys learned as much as I did. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.